Before modeling anything, the first step is to define the purpose of the model. This helps us to determine the appropriate modeling style, how much time to invest, and which tools to use. We'll focus on product design and visualization, building two models optimized for different scenarios. The first will be a quick and dirty model intended to support design development or serve as an underlay for designers. We'll use non-destructive methods, making it easy to manipulate the geometry for further refinement. One of the tools in this workflow is the Boolean modifier, which allows us to create cutouts in the geometry without worrying about topology. This enables a fast workflow but renders the model unsuitable for export to other software such as Alias. While there are workarounds to import such geometry into Alias, it's not considered best practice and the resulting model would be far from optimized. Alternatively, the model could be exported into Alias before Boolean modifiers are added. This hybrid workflow allows for a lightweight model, and operations such as Booleans or adding small precise details are easily done in NURBS modeling software anyway. It's simply a matter of knowing which tools and methods will yield the most efficient results. The second model will be suitable for product visualization. The key differences will be the level of detail, which will result in a heavier model. This version can be exported into Alias without issues or workarounds. However, after a certain threshold where the detail becomes extremely dense, the amount of geometry required to maintain that level of detail can outweigh the benefits of using sub-D and NURBS software. In such cases, the same level of detail can be achieved faster and more precisely using NURBS. We'll be using PureRef to organize our reference images. PureRef is a free, no-nonsense app that lets you pin, arrange and scale reference images on an infinite canvas. I've downloaded several images of the MacBook from several angles, including close-ups of detailed areas. Most importantly, I have orthographic side and top views, and I've also noted down the MacBook's measurements. I'll start by describing my Blender setup. This entire tutorial is done using stock Blender without any paid add-ons. I've turned on screencast keys, so if you look down here, you can see which keys or mouse buttons I press. In Property Editor, I've set the length unit to millimeters. I've pre-organized my file by adding 3 collections: reference, base, screen, keys, and helpers. And now without further ado, let's start modeling. We'll begin by adding a cube and resizing it to the dimensions of the laptop. We'll use this as a guide for our reference images. I'm just going to move my PureRef out the way here a little bit like this, and I'm just going to zoom in to our measurements. Now, as I've mentioned before, we are using millimeters and these measurements are in centimeters, so we've just got to move the decimal point over. Let's start by building this cube. Let's go into front view. Let's turn on X-ray mode. So the width is 312.6 and the width will be the X dimension. So let's just add that in here. 312.6. The height, which will be the Z, is 15.5. Just zoom in and look in top view. And then the depth, which is Y, will be 221.2. Now with the cube selected, let's make sure that we reset all transforms. So let's just zoom in a little bit like that. And then let's make sure we're in top view and we're in orthographic. Let's select our reference collection. Let's open up a Windows Explorer. Let's start by dragging in our top view. Let's make sure we're in top view in the bottom viewport as well. And in the bottom viewport, let's zoom to the bottom right-hand corner of our cube. Select the cube and turn on wireframe so we can see it more clearly. In the top view, we're just going to select our top reference image and let's just rename that to top. Now with that still selected, let's scale it down to get it as close as we can to our cube. Now in the top viewport, let's zoom into the top left-hand corner. Let's turn X-ray mode in the bottom viewport. Select our top reference image and then scale it down a little bit further. Move out a little bit here. Scale it to try and get it as close as we can to the left-hand edge and the right-hand edge in the bottom view. Again, let's make sure that the top reference image is selected and we can just hit G and just tap left and then down and try and get it as close as we can so that the reference image is matching our cube. In the outliner, let's click on this icon here to disable that top view in this viewport. Click on reference again. Let's open up our Windows Explorer, drag in top closed, and we're just going to repeat that process. Now let's go into front view in both viewports, and this time drag in the front reference image and repeat the process. Let's disable top closed and then let's select our front reference image and our cube and then let's nudge them up in Z so that the feet are standing on the floor, which is of course at Z0. Now let's go into our left viewport, disable the front reference image, and let's just repeat that process. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to snap the 3D cursor to the bottom left hand corner of our cube, and then I'm going to set the pivot point to 3D cursor. Then I'm going to scale the left reference image until it matches in the bottom viewport, and I'm just going to nudge it over to the left and down a little bit as well. Let's scale it up, and let's just rename that to left and disable that in this viewport. And finally the right. With those reference images in place, we can now start modeling. So the strategy we'll use here is we'll build this fillet here first, as it's the biggest feature. We'll build that fillet manually, then we'll cut the cube at that point there to define the top and the bottom. Then we will build this bottom fillet, which goes all the way around underneath here. We'll build that one using modifiers, and we can adjust the parameters and get it as close as we can to this one as well. Then after that, we'll add this recessed area in here for the QWERTY keyboard, and then we'll add some booleans for the mouse track and for these ports. Right, let's make this viewport a little bit bigger. We're going to duplicate the cube, and let's put the original cube into our helpers collection and disable that in viewports. We'll begin by adding a loop cut here and one here. Then let's delete these vertices, and let's add a mirror modifier. Let's turn clipping on and make it mirror about X and Y. And now when we make changes on this corner, they're repeated on the other sides as well. Next, let's select these edges here, and then let's rip those. Then let's select that top and separate it. Let's select our bottom. Let's disable that. And then let's select our top. Go in top view. Let's delete this middle vertex as well, actually. And then let's add a subdivision modifier to that. Go to edit mode. Let's select that vertex. And then let's duplicate that vertex and then hide it. And then select that vertex again. And then let's add a bevel to that. And then let's change the parameters to this. Make sure that profile shape is set to 1. Let's zoom in a little bit. Now, in order to maintain a perfectly balanced corner like this, we need to make sure that these vertices are the same distance from this corner one as these are from it. There are several ways of doing this, but the way we'll do it is, first of all, we'll make sure that's the last vertex selected, and we'll make sure that pivot point is active element. So now if we scale, these vertices are moving the same amount relative to that one there. So if we scale outwards, we are getting a similar shape to our reference image. But if we just increase the subdivision modifiers, we'll see that it's deviating a little bit in these corners. So there's only a certain amount that you can do with this. So what we want to do is we want to move this vertex inboard so that it's not peaking as much as it is there. So let's grab that corner vertex, move it an arbitrary amount, and then make sure that here the X is the same amount as Y, so 1 and -1. So it's moved along 1 and down 1 millimeter. Now we can unhide that vertex we had there earlier. We can select all these and make sure that's the last vertex selected, and now we can repeat that exercise in the comfort of knowing that we're going to have a perfectly balanced fillet. I'm just going to take that top reference image and we're just going to reduce the opacity on it. And let's just move that into the base collection, and now we can toggle it on and off so you can easily compare it to our reference image. And I know that obviously these corners are all the same, but it's nice to get a different perspective because you might see something that you've missed before. Okay, so we're happy with that corner there. Now let's move on to this bottom one here. So let's turn on our front reference image. Let's reduce the opacity a little bit as we did before. Let's zoom in. Let's move that bottom half into our base collection as well. Let's turn it on. Let's turn on wireframe on that as well. Disable selection on the reference images. Now let's select the geometry for the top. Let's select all, and then let's extrude it down in Z and snap it to the bottom, and we can delete that bottom half now. Go to side view, let's turn on our left reference image, and we're just going to trim the cube at this point here to give us the bottom and then the lid. So let's go to edit mode, and then let's add loop cut, move it up, and then let's select that loop cut. Let's select that edge loop and let's rip it, select that top half, and then let's separate that. Let's just rename that to lid and move that into our screen collection. Let's rename this one to base. Let's go back to top view, and then let's turn on top reference image. Then let's select that edge loop there, top view. Let's zoom in a little bit. Now let's offset those, something like that. And then let's move those down and along. So let's start by aligning that top line. So just zoom right in and then just nudge that down in Y. And let's zoom in on the left hand side one, and then G and then X to move that in X. What we need now is we need a vertex that's at the theoretical of this line and this line. So if we just duplicate that and align it to that one in X, we can now grab all these, make sure that's the last selected, and we can scale those to maintain a perfectly balanced fillet on that corner there. And again, we can toggle visibility to see how close we are. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now let's build a surface between there and there. And then let's continue building faces along there all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to isolate this quickly. What we have here is a normals issue. So if we just look at face orientation, we'll see that these faces, normals, are opposite to these ones. So all we've got to do here is go into edit mode, select all, Alt N, and then calculate outside, and it will fix that issue there. While we're here, we're just going to add a mean crease to that edge as well. Let's bring everything else back in. Now let's build this bottom face, and then we're just going to add this fillet on there, which we're going to do using modifiers. So let's quickly isolate that again, actually. We're just going to select those two edges there. We're going to extrude them in X, and these are a little bit in the way, so let's just select that edge loop and hide it. Let's just temporarily disable subdivision modifier. Let's just hide these as well. We need a loop cut to match that vertex and another one to match that one. So if we just add a loop cut and slide to those, if we select these vertices and then that one last, and we do scale X0, we'll line those up with that. And then if we select these vertices, this one last, we do scale X0, then we can add a face between those, face there, and then a face there. So it gives us a
base. We're just going to check the normals on that as well.
That's looking good. Okay, so now we're going to select this edge loop here, and we're going to add a bevel weight to that edge. Then we're going to add a bevel modifier, move it to the top of the stack, change this to weight, and then reduce this to something like 5. Let's turn on our reference images. Let's turn on subdivision modifier. And as you can see, this is far from being a balanced fillet. So if you just turn off optimal display, reduce the levels down to 1, we'll be able to see better what's causing the imbalance. So what we need to do is we need to make sure, first of all, that this edge here is the same as that one there. So what we can do here, we can find the length of that. We're going up here and selecting edge length, and that distance there is 11.2. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to minimize these, turn them off for a sec. So we want this to be 11.2. So let's grab that, make sure auto merge is switched off. Let's slide that over until it touches that, and then let's move that over 11.2. Now we can do the same thing with this one up here. So let's slide it up to there and move it in X by 11.2. Then let's align this vertex with this one and this one. So we just go, make sure this one's selected second, and we go scale X0, and then select that one, then this one, and we go scale Y0. Then we don't need to, but let's just move these out a little bit anyway. So we're going to go down, let's say 7, and then across 7 as well, just to give them a little bit of breathing room. -7, like that. Then I guess while we're here, we may as well just line these up as well. So if we just go straight line from there to there, there to there, turn on auto merge and just slide these along like that. And now when we turn on our modifiers, we'll have a nicely balanced corner there. So if we just increase the subdivision modifiers, turn on our optimize display and shade smooth, turn off wireframe, we've got a much more balanced corner there. Let's turn on our left reference image, turn on wireframe again, turn on X-ray, go to that bevel modifier, increase the segments to 3, and then let's increase the amount until we get closer to our reference image. Let's have a look in front view. It's going to be the same, but let's just have a look at it from a different perspective. So front. So this looks like it could do with being a little bit smaller. So if we change that to 5.6, nice round number, and that is looking very nice. Although I do think it's peeling away a little bit too high up here. So if you look at the reference image, it looks like it's pretty flat up to about here. whereas we are peeling away a little bit higher up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the segments to 5, and I'm going to increase this to 6. So that does get us closer. However, if I reduce this segments down to 1 again, and let's change that to 5. Now with one segment, we've just got one chamfer there, and if we increase that to 2, this middle edge is moved away from this corner one where it started from. Now if I increase the shape to 1, that corner will stay where it is, and what it will mean is that when I turn on the subdivision modifier, let's increase this a little bit, the fact that these are in a straight line means that this can stay flatter for longer, which is closer to the reference images. So if we just change that to 3 and then reduce that from 12 to something like 8, and then let's have a look. So I'm just going to move our left view down a little bit to make that selectable. Let's go left and then slide that down just a touch, and that's better. But I think now we're going to have to drop that top down a touch as well, something like that. And the front view, oops, so as I move those, I missed the middle ones which were hidden. So let's just grab all of those, and then let's say that one there, for example, and we go scale Z0, and then now back on the plane. Give that a quick save. Now let's go in top view again, and now we're going to just build the recessed QWERTY area. Select that. Let's turn off the measurements. Actually, now I can't see the bottom, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease the X-ray opacity, which is here, so I can see our reference image a little bit better. That doesn't really help much, so I'm going to select that again and just increase the opacity of that to there. Let's select that edge loop and then just offset. And then let's build some faces between those edges there like that. Then I'm going to select that edge loop there. Let's go G, Z, nudge it down, and then go -1. Then we're going to select these edges here, extrude them in X, isolate that quickly, and then again we need one loop cut to match that edge and another one to match that one. So loop cut and slide, increase it to 2. Let's select these vertices, select that one last, scale X0. Let's select these, select that one last, scale X0. Let's build a face that goes from here to here, face, face, face. Turn subdivision modifier on. Let's select that edge loop there. Let's add a mean crease to that. And we just need to give a little bit of shape to that recessed surface there. So let's add another loop cut in there. And we're just going to nudge those down and then enter. Let's have a look. Okay, so that's good. Let's just turn off the other reference images. Let's isolate that one. So yeah, obviously you will have noticed that the recessed bit only goes up to the bottom of the QWERTY, whereas our one goes all the way down to the bottom. So we'll now have to break one of our modifiers in order to achieve that. So we can still use mirror, but not across all 4 sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply Y. So let's just keep only Y on, and let's apply that one, then add another mirror modifier, move it to the top of the stack, turn on clipping, and then now we can move these vertices up and match that corner there. That one there? Yes. So we've matched that corner there. Now, because we've done that, these vertices and edges here are a little bit tortured and skew-whiffed and stretched. They are all on the plane, so for the purpose of what we're doing, we don't really need to do anything. However, if you wanted to clean this up a little bit, what we could do is, let's isolate that quickly. Let's add a loop cut here. Let's find the distance here. So I've got a shortcut for that, which is that one. So 8.29. So we're just going to select all of those, make sure this is turned off, move that one down to here, and then move it up in Y by 8.29, was it? So now these should be the same as these. So that's neater already. And then we're going to do the following. Cut from here in X. Let's turn off the edge lengths. We can go cut from here in X, turn on auto merge, and then let's slide that vertex over like that. Let's add another cut. Let's go over in X and slide that one over and that one like that. But as I say, all of this is planar, so none of that was necessary. But in case you wanted to see what you could do, that's what you could do. Now we've got a little bit of a mess going on the back. Let's see how we can fix that. So we can get rid of some of these. So if we just slide those over with auto merge on, then we can grab those, make sure that one is the last selected, scale Y0. So that's helped there. Then bottom view, let's just trim in X, get rid of that. So now these are obviously different, so let's select that one, scale Y0, let's find that distance there, 8.58. So if we just grab those, turn off auto merge, snap those down to there, move them up by 8.58, we'll have symmetry. Again, all this is on the plane, so somewhat unnecessary, but if you want it to look all nice, then you could do that. Let's have a look at what we've got. Now, if you've only added a crease to this geometry and you've got smooth shade on, it won't actually give you a crease. What you need to do is, as well as a crease in here, we select those, we need to also mark those as sharp, and then it will be a true crease. Let's turn on subdivision modifier. We do have these, which we've been using as guides, which we don't really need anymore, so we can just select our main geometry, select inverse, and then delete. If you are in a design phase, these are obviously useful if you're going to make further changes, so you can always go back to these. If I just select those, make sure that's the last one selected, and then if I do scale, do Shift Z so that it doesn't scale in Z, and then we can continue making further changes. And that is our base. Give that a quick save, and we're now ready to start building our QWERTY keyboard.